I am at the residence of Cora and Bernhardt. This appears to be a .25 caliber bullet.
Somebody was in there looking for something.
Who would want them dead?
That's the million-dollar question.
This case is keeping me up at night because there are holes I can't fill.
There's all kinds of stories about who did it.
There was an outcry. I mean, people are scared.
You know, you've got these beautiful rolling hills with all the crop just newly planted here. We just pulled into Portage County, Ohio, which is a very rural part of the state. A lot of corn and peas and cows. It is the heartland of America. Atwater Township, founded as a township, 1810.
My family has been a part of Atwater for about 100+ years. The church behind me, my great-grandfather built that chimney way back in 1933.
It's basically small-town USA. People out here love each other. Yeah, and you can see it. If people need help, there's always somebody there.
My neighbor will call me up if my car is out in the driveway too long and not put away. She'll say, "Are you okay?"
This is the rural farm road here in Atwater, where in April of 1990, an elderly couple was murdered brutally in their kitchen. And so this very small community was rightfully horrified.
One day, I received notification that a man had not seen his neighbor for a couple days. He went over and kind of checked the house out. Everything was secure, but he looked in and he saw two bodies laying in the house. He called the Portage County Sheriff's Department. My detective bureau and deputies responded.
It is approximately 8:33 p.m. I am at the residence of Cora and Bernhardt, H-A-R-T-I-G.
From the observation of the arrangement of the chairs, it appeared that Mr. and Mrs. Hardy were both shot sitting at the kitchen table. Mrs. Hardy had been shot 5 times, and Mr. Hardy had been shot 3 times.
This appears to be a projectile, possibly the .25 caliber bullet.
There were 25 caliber casings.
That would be a total of 7 shell casings at this point, plus 1 projectile.
The detectives started searching the rest of the house. There was no sign of forced entry, and it didn't appear there was any struggle of any kind. It appeared to me that it had to be somebody who was welcomed into their home.
Come to the bathroom. The one cabinet door is ajar.
The detectives went through, and you could see the drawers pulled out and just papers strewn around.
Papers on the floor in disarray. The end table, 2 drawers open.
The house had been ransacked. Somebody was in there looking for something. I asked the detectives, "Do you know if anything was taken?" And they said no. Watches and things were still in the drawers. There wasn't anything of any value taken.
When the murders happened, it was the talk of the town. Everybody was concerned about it. Nobody knew why it happened.
This was big, big news in Portage County because it was so odd. I'm Andrea Simakis. In the 1990s, I was working at the Cleveland Plain Dealer doing investigative reporting. According to friends and neighbors, the Hardigs were quiet and well thought of in the community. Mr. Hardig was a butcher. He was retired at the time of the murders, and Cora was a homemaker. It's not usual to have a well-known, well-liked elderly couple gunned down in their own homes. It frightened people.
There's all kinds of stories about what happened and who did it. It causes fear, and people lock their doors. It's terrible to have to feel that way in a town like this.
in April of 1990 when they found this 81-year-old couple murdered in their kitchen. It was shocking. The pressure on elected officials to get to an answer quickly was immense. People want to be able to sleep at night. We are meeting with Vicki Buckwalter, who has worked as an investigator here in Portage County. She got involved in this case very early on.
Vicki?
Yes.
I'm Hillary.
Hi.
It is so nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you so much for meeting today.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is a heinous murder of an elderly couple. What did you know when you first saw this case?
There was no forced entry and there were no fingerprints.
Was there a murder weapon found on scene?
There was no murder weapon, but they did determine that the Hartigs were both shot with a .25 automatic pistol.
So where did the police start looking?
They started doing searches of crimes in the area.
Okay.
And there was some home invasion robberies in Alliance, Ohio, which was 10 miles maybe from Atwater. And they were done by just kids. And they immediately got on the radar of the sheriff's department. They were doing what they referred to as car shopping, where they would go around and see if car doors would open, and then they'd take change out of there or take credit cards and buy pizza and, you know, drugs and alcohol, things like that.
Tell me a little bit about these kids.
Just teenagers ranging from 14 to 21.
They were a group of young guys. They were crashing in the home of one of their friends. They had no supervision. They could do what they wanted. And they were like lost boys. Tyrone Knowling was the leader of this gang of lost boys. He was 18 at the time. He had a long juvenile record. Following him was Joey D'Alessandro. Joey was also 18, and they were tight. Gary St. Clair was 21, a high school dropout. And then rounding out this group, a 14-year-old Butch Walcott. On April 4th, 1990, their petty crimes escalated to a true home invasion. They knocked on a door nearby the place where they were crashing. There was an elderly couple, and the ruse was they said their car broke down and they needed help. They were invited in. Tyrone went in with a shotgun. While inside, they stole cash, jewelry, and a .25 caliber pistol. The very next day, Tyrone did the same thing at another neighbor's home, another elderly couple, and this time Tyrone was armed with the .25 caliber pistol he had taken in the previous robbery. Anything that wasn't nailed down was taken. Cash, jewelry taken off hands, watches taken off wrists.
Tyrone is in the bedroom and he's got the gun in his hand and he's loading up things in this pillowcase, and it caused his trigger finger to shoot the gun. And he was freaked out. He was described by the woman as a scared rabbit. He asked her, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" and got out of there.
Witnesses saw them running from the home in broad daylight, carrying a VCR with the cord trailing behind them.
It is a serious crime to walk into anybody's house and pull a gun on them. These boys were suspect right from the go of the Hartig murder.
You have home invasions, older couples, home at the time, and chiefly a .25 caliber is used in the last robbery in Alliance and to murder the Hartigs. For the police, the similarities were too hard to ignore. Very close in time to when the Hartigs' bodies were discovered. In the nearby town of Alliance, there were similar home invasions of elderly couples, which made those robberies very interesting to police.
You're walking a very fine line there of juvenile hijinks, like breaking into cars and stuff, and now you're venturing into very adult, very criminal behavior.
It was known that Tyrone had a .25 caliber weapon, and right away everybody thought this could be the weapon that was used in the Hartig case. And the Detective Bureau went to interview these kids about the Hartig murder.
Tyrone readily admitted his culpability in the Alliance robberies, but he says he has nothing to do with the murders, as do his friends.
And so, while they're locked up, does the investigation into the Hartig murders continue?
Yeah, it does continue.
The county sheriff is investigating the surface similarities of the crimes, home invasions, elderly couple. But after those surface similarities, the cases diverge. Nothing is taken out of the Hartig home. Money is left in Bernhardt's pocket. Cora's wedding ring is on her finger. Why leave everything behind when your previous MO had you taking everything in sight?
The murder weapon was a .25, which really got these guys on the radar.
Yeah.
And so they did ballistics testing, and the gun that Tyrone shot at the second robbery came back to not be the murder weapon.
It's not the same gun.
Not the same gun.
Police also recovered a cigarette butt on the Hartig's driveway. They thought could have been dropped by the killer because neither of the Hartigs smoked, and Bernhardt kept a very clean driveway.
There was DNA tests performed on the cigarette, but the 4 boys, it was none of their DNA.
I feel like the sheriff's department was probably like, yes, we figured it out. And then for the gun not to match, and for the cigarette butt not to match any of the 4 guys, how do you tie them in then?
You don't.
Okay.
And they didn't.
I don't believe there was anything found in possession of these boys that would put them at the house. There was nothing that could hold them as suspects for this crime.
What can you tell me about the Hartigs? Who would want them dead?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Mr. Hartig had clearly saved throughout his life, and he was known to be a person you could go to for personal loans.
In their investigation, they found out that there was a doctor that was friends with Mr. Hartig, and the doctor said that he had talked to Mr. Hartig the day before they were killed.
Okay.
And he said that Mr. Hartig had loaned his insurance man, Louis Lehman, $10,000. And it had come due. He was going to meet with the insurance man to get his money, and Mr. Hartig said, I haven't heard a hide nor hair from him. Something doesn't smell right, and I'll be calling him as soon as we hang up the phone here.
Mr. Hartig was going to have words with his insurance guy. That was the last thing the doctor ever heard from them?
Yes.
Investigators naturally wanted to speak to this insurance agent, Louis Lehman, if he was indeed the last call Bernhard Hartig might have made in anger. And significantly, they also found out that this insurance agent had a .25 caliber pistol registered to him. They brought him in, they questioned him. When they asked him to produce the weapon, he said he'd sold it, he couldn't remember to whom, and he couldn't remember when. Then investigators rightfully questioned Louis Lehman about the loan.
Louis had said that, yes, he did know the Hartigs, but that he didn't owe them any money.
He said he didn't owe them any money?
Said he didn't owe them any money.
The doctor said he had a very detailed repayment schedule, but when police searched the house, they could not find any such record for this insurance agent. And so they let him walk out at the door.
We didn't have enough evidence to pursue anybody, really. I would say it became a cold case.
The sheriff's department was kind of at a loss. There was an outcry. I mean, people are scared.
Hi, is this David Norris?
Yes, it is.
Hi, sir. This is Andrea Simakis calling from the Plain Dealer.
Portage County prosecutor David Norris was under enormous pressure to solve this murder in this sleepy town that never should have happened.
It's like after about a year later, nothing had happened, and it kind of embarrassed everybody.
Right.
We've got a duty to investigate this further.
Okay. Here's the thing. I know that Ron Craig was brought into this investigation.
David Norris brought in his bulldog, his enforcer, an investigator named Ron Craig, to take a look at this cold case and see what he could do.
Ron Craig is a guy who has a reputation of getting confessions from people.
He is the prosecutor's investigator.
Correct.
Why was he considered successful?
He got convictions.
What do they do?
2 years after the murders, they decided to refocus on Tyrone Knowling and friends.
Tyrone is doing time for the Alliance robberies. So is Gary St. Clair. Joey was in and out of jail for unrelated drug crimes. And Butch is out. Butch is free. So Ron Craig goes right to Butch Walcott, who's still a teenager. He's 16 at this time.
Ron Craig was intense, to say the very least. Ron Craig and the prosecutor, they interrogated me for a long time. They started to grind on me, you know, because I wasn't admitting it. The thing that scared me the most was they said that they had some utility worker up on a pole that seen us there. And that, to me, was scary, because that's an eyewitness.
They also tell him that there was a match on the cigarette butt to him, and I'm sure Butch is thinking, if they say that there's evidence putting me there, then I'm in trouble. I'm in big trouble.
They said, we'll prosecute you. Even though you're a juvenile, you might not get death row, but you'll get the rest of your life.
And they start saying, hey, if you say that Tyrone was involved in these murders, then we'll wipe your record. We'll give you immunity on the murders.
When they say, well, we'll give you immunity, that was my life's breath. That was the thing that was going to save me. I said I was there.
So Butch said they drove from Alliance to Atwater in Joey D'Alessandro's car. They saw the Hardicks' house. Butch and Joey stay in the car, and Tyrone and Gary go inside. While inside, that is when Tyrone executes the Hardicks.
Who do they go to next?
They go to Joey next. And they have Butch saying he was the driver, and Joey does take a deal. So the dominoes are starting to fall. And then there's Gary.
Well, he's already in for 5 to 25 on this first conviction. What is the investigator and the prosecutor threatening him with?
Oh, they're threatening him with death. Mm-hmm. We know you were in the house. Butch puts you in the house. Joey puts you in the house. We know you were in the house.
Ron Craig has done his job. Now 3 guys, Butch, Joey, and Gary, are pointing the finger at the trigger man, Tyrone Knowling.
2 deputy sheriffs from Portage County, they told me, you're going to court, pack your stuff. They drove me back down to Portage County, and a detective came up and said I was charged with 2 aggravated murders in the first degree. They said nothing, didn't ask nothing. They claimed they already had all their evidence, and I was just like, is this a joke? They offered a deal, and it was 30 to life. The judge spoke to me and said I was young. He didn't want to sentence me to death. I should take this deal. My lawyer said hey, you should think about it, and the prosecutor said, we'll give you 24 hours. I called my dad, and he was like, well, you're not taking it, right? I said, absolutely not. No, because I didn't do this.
He refuses the deal to save his life. He refuses the deal that would keep him off death row. He knows 3 people are going to take that stand and say he killed the Hardicks, and yet he does not cave under the pressure. That blows me away.
So how do you get involved in this case?
At that time, I was working for a private investigation firm. I was hired by Tyrone Knowling's defense attorneys to investigate the murder, to prepare them for court.
Okay. What's the evidence that the state puts forward to try and convict Tyrone?
They didn't have a murder weapon. They didn't have any DNA evidence. They had the boys who were testifying.
Butch testified that he saw smoke coming out of Tyrone's gun as he was fleeing the Hardigs' home. Then Joey takes the stand and says that Tyrone calls him from jail, and he tells him, Joey, you've got to get rid of the murder weapon. It's in the glove compartment of your car. Joey testifies that he sells it to a fence, and that's how the murder weapon disappears. At the trial, everything lines up just like Tyrone was told it would, except for one thing. When it's Gary St. Clair's turn to take the stand, he drops this bombshell.
Gary gets up there and says, we weren't there. Tyrone wasn't there. He didn't do it. I didn't do it. None of us did it.
Did the state freak out?
Yeah, they treated him as a hostile witness.
What does that mean? What do they do?
They get up there with his prior statements, and they tried to impeach him. Didn't you say that? And didn't you say this? And so Gary was forced to say yes, yes, yes. You would think that would create reasonable doubt in the jury's mind, but somehow it did not.
One of the jurors came in, and she looked at me, and she put her head down and started crying. That told me it wasn't going to be good. And my heart just sank. They immediately rushed me out of the courtroom, took me to death row in a matter of 72 hours. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. You know, this can't be happening. It's a walking nightmare.
So for a young man who declares his innocence this whole time, is sentenced to death, what do you do?
He got a post-conviction attorney, and that's where I came in.
You came back in?
I came back in.
So what did you do?
I wanted to find Butch so bad.
One day, this pretty little lady was knocking on my door, and she asked me if she could talk to me, and I'm like, yeah, sure.
I said, I'm here about the Tyrone Nolan case. He thought I was from the prosecutor's office.
I was in a ton of fear at this point in my life. I thought they're gonna wrap it up somehow and get me in prison too.
When I told Butch that I just wanted to hear his story, his legs went weak because he was so relieved.
She said, you know, you can change everything and say what the truth is. I was, yes, let's do that.
Butch said, I will do whatever it takes to make this right. The testimony that I gave put this man on death row. I can't live with myself for what I did.
Ronald Craig, the devil incarnate. That's not a joke. When you don't say what he wants you to say, there's tons of pressure, tons of intimidation. They wouldn't let my dad into the interrogation room. I probably got a good 40, 50 hours of interrogation, which is very terrifying to go through, especially when people have your freedom in their hands.
Ron Craig realized he had a problem, and that was Butch didn't know anything about the crime. He didn't know anything about the crime scene. He couldn't even describe the Hardigs' house. Nothing. So, to solve this problem, the Portage County investigative team brings in a psychologist to unearth buried memories.
They told me he was going to get the memories to come out. Now, I had no reason to believe that they were lying. Okay, I did forget it. So, yeah, let me go see this doctor and let's get these memories out. So I'm not holding on to this.
Butch said that they fed him information. So after he tells them that he can't describe the house, they drive him to the house.
So there's myself, the doctor, and Ron Craig all driving down this road. Everything was normal, conversation was normal. And then as we were coming up on the house, everything got quiet. The car slowed down enough for him to look at the house and then look through the rearview mirror directly into my eyes and then back at the house. And that was my signal. That's the house. That's the one. That's it. Nobody sees what Ron Craig's doing. He's not making any noises. Everything is subliminal. This is what I should be describing to them because this is what they obviously want to hear.
The doctor told the prosecution team, Ron Craig et al., that he was concerned that the more they pressed Butch, the more frightened he was that what they were doing was pushing him to make a false statement. He warned them that it might be going too far. Prosecutors ignored that and continued to condition and rehearse Butch.
I was telling lies, 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 lies. To do what? Save myself. And they put me in a predicament where it was okay to lie. It was like being molested, but in your brain.
He was manipulated. If you think about how old he was, it was child abuse.
Here's what didn't happen. None of it. The whole thing is made up. We were never there. The car never went there. Those tires were never on that road. It didn't happen.
Joey says that Ron Craig et al. Were yelling at him, telling him he's got to come through for them. They all had the same story. They have a choice. Lie, confess, or die. You have kids without advocates. You have a crime that everyone's desperate to solve. It's a perfect storm to create a false confession.
We have 3 affidavits. The only people who could put Tyrone in that house, they've all recanted. I'm over the moon excited about it.
And so what does that mean? If that's what the state's case was based on and they all take it back?
Portage County actually gave us an evidentiary hearing. But the bad thing is you have a county who prosecutes these guys. Mm-hmm. And then you have judges in the same county that you have to deal with. So when we got to the hearing, the judge wouldn't let the boys testify. And the attorney is like, you have to hear these boys, they're credible. And the judge was, nope. So basically it was dead in the water.
Nothing. Did the court not care about new information?
It's almost impossible to get a conviction overturned.
The anchor of the case against Tyrone are these 3 eyewitness testimonies. But all 3 of them have been recanted. Why do you feel like there's so much pushback?
If you have a wrongful conviction, not only are they going to owe Tyrone Nolan a lot of monetary value, but they're also going to have to maybe go back into all of their cases that investigator was involved in and take a second look.
So they'd rather kill a potentially innocent person than go back and check their work.
That's my view. I mean, reputation trumps life.
This is the neighborhood where Tyrone and Gary and Joey and Butch were all living together. The boys' goal was to rob people. So they had money. They could buy beer. They could buy weed. Their whole MO was to stay local and find places that they could access on foot. That these boys would make the commute from here almost 10 miles out to a place where you have no connection, and then murder an elderly couple and not take anything. I don't know how you make that motive make sense to a jury.
Hey, hey.
Hey, how
Hi.
are you?
How great to meet you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to meet you. I have such respect for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Tell me about this case. As an investigative journalist,
I had done some work on wrongful convictions in the past. You have to be really careful about what cases you go after.
Well, because do you feel like your reputation is on the line when you dig into something?
100%. But this case started bothering me out the gate. I mean, if you're 14, 16, 18, 20, right? And you're hearing you can either tell us Tyrone did it or you are going to die, that's a death threat. They're being threatened with death, the ultimate penalty. I started looking into the case and I'm like, oh my God, wait, so no hair, no physical evidence whatsoever, no blood, no saliva, no weapon, nothing, right? You can send somebody on death row with nothing And yeah, the answer is yes, you can. So I tried to find every living human being who would talk to me that touched the case, and one of those people was an Alliance cop who impounded Joey's car because at trial, Joey got on the stand and explained the reason the murder weapon wasn't in Tyrone's possession. Joey said they left the murder weapon in the glove compartment of the car, and after they were all arrested, Tyrone told him to get rid of it. But Joey couldn't have gotten rid of the gun because no gun existed, because police had already searched the car.
They searched the car good for the weapon. It was in the driveway and all the doors were open. Okay. We were really trying to tie in that finding a .25 automatic there.
And you didn't find anything?
I don't remember anything of value or importance coming out of the car.
He didn't find the murder weapon because it wasn't there. And when I asked the prosecutor, Bellucci, about this, yeah, he said the cop was clearly mistaken.
I'm not sure that the Alliance police didn't make a mistake in there.
Okay.
In this situation, the prosecutor is undermining the Alliance Police Department.
Yeah, that car was impounded and it was searched, and there was no .25 in the glove compartment, and you're telling us we should disregard that? That's ridiculous. In the prosecutor's files, I found evidence that wasn't presented to the jury that is about alternative suspects. The insurance agent interested me not only because he had confirmed to have had the same caliber weapon as was used in the murders, but that he had a relationship with the Hardigs. He had been in the Hardig home. And if we go back to the crime scene, there were papers everywhere, as if someone was looking for something. They certainly weren't looking for money. They left jewelry, and they left $160 in cash. Could there have been a record of a loan that had gone bad? And could that be the reason that the Hardigs were killed? I don't know, but it's a legitimate thing to ask. The jurors never heard about it.
Andrea laid it out like a roadmap. Everything that was done in this case and about the coercion. She wrote a beautiful article about what can happen in a little small town like this.
When your article comes out, is the newspaper confident, or are they nervous about attacking elected officials?
They would not have published it had they not felt it could stand up to scrutiny. And I was really hopeful that it would blow it wide open, it would make a difference. And certainly Tyrone's attorneys were excited by it because they said there were other things I found in the court record that they didn't know about. So we decided to publish all of it. We put it online so anybody could have access to it.
Is anything found post-conviction that should have been flagged?
Tyrone's attorneys were able to pluck documents that they say were not heard. At trial, police, during the initial investigation, talked to a lot of people, and one of the people told them about a young man who told someone at his school that his foster brother had killed the Hardigs. But the police just dropped it, and Tyrone's attorneys found this document, and then they found this young man, Nathan Chesley, who's now an adult, what he had to say. It's shocking.
My name is Nathan Chesley, and in 1990 I was 17. I was a ward of the state. Then they sent me to a foster home in Atwater, Ohio. Dan Wilson also stayed there. Dan Wilson had various crimes as a child, but the biggest one was murder. Dan was robbing an elderly man, threw him down the stairs, killed him. Everybody knew Dan was a murderer. When I was in foster care, where we were staying in Atwater was within about a mile of the Hardigs' house. Dan knew the Hardigs. He mowed their grass. One night after the murders of the Hardigs, Dan came in. I could tell he was drunk. He had that look on his face, and he was talking in a different tone. And he explained that he had killed the Hardigs, and he was just kind of like confessing on himself. He never went into why they were killed, but I was 100% for sure he did it because he had a .25 auto handgun. Dan was a very violent person. Anything was possible. I was just waiting for a knock on the door from law enforcement. but they never did. After that, Dan left right away. The next time I heard about him, on the news, they're talking about Dan Wilson, Ohio, is going to be executed.
Dan Wilson kidnapped a young woman, put her body in the trunk, and set the car on fire. I thought he looked better as a suspect from a psychological standpoint than Scared Rabbit Knowling and his gang. I wanted to talk to Norris and ask him why he discounted this suspect.
This case is keeping me up at night because there are holes I can't fill. I wanted to know if you could remember why Wilson was thrown out as a suspect.
And I just don't remember.
Right.
I don't remember.
He never gave me a satisfactory answer.
We're looking for cases where there is new evidence that can be raised to the court. There were documents in the files of Tyrone's co-defendants that do not appear to be in Tyrone's file. What these notes show is that even prior to Tyrone's trial, police had thought enough of Dan Wilson as a suspect to compare his blood type to the blood type from saliva on the cigarette butt found in the Hardig's driveway, and found that it was consistent. So the DNA tests had definitively excluded Tyrone and his co-defendants, but Dan Wilson could not be excluded. You have a very credible lead against a person who had committed other violent crimes, who lived right next door to the Hardigs, and the jury never got to hear any of that.
Justice is not just having a guy in jail, it's having the right person in jail. The Innocence Project wanted me to get my story to the court. So I went to Portage County and sat there. Literally, I sat there probably 4 or 5 hours on a bench waiting to get called in to tell the judge what I had to say about Dan. They just let me go and wouldn't hear anything. They didn't care that it could be Dan.
There are lots of things at the scene that were likely last touched by the person who committed the crime. 10 casings from the .25 caliber pistol. Ring boxes that were opened and rummaged through.
Touch DNA is something we could never have done in 1990, but now we have state-of-the-art testing that can pick up just if you've touched something, right? This perhaps would be finally the exoneration Tyrone has sought.
Yeah.
It could also lead us to the real killer. This case stinks. We all know it. And yet one prosecutor with Ohio judges' help is looking the other way.
As far as where I stand today in my appeals, I have very little left and I am up against time. At this point, there is no death date, but this is probably my last hope.
You have no idea how deep inside of me I want to say I'm sorry. And the saddest part is, if I wasn't a kid and so scared, then I would have told the truth from the beginning, and none of this would have happened.
When you start to understand the facts, that my 3 friends, they were manipulated and pressured and lied to by Ron Craig, it's easy to forgive, because I'm not the only victim here. Everybody in this case is a victim. I sit on death row without a shred of evidence. It can happen to you, it can happen to anybody, because it's happening to me.
People love true crime. They love solving the puzzle. But then it's really easy to turn the channel or turn the television off and forget that there is a potentially innocent person who is going to die. He's going to die if something isn't done. I'm sorry. It's overwhelming. It just hits you sometimes.